hill forever, where you're always trying to get up to the top, and then somebody else will try to knock you off. It just doesn't really work.
But that would be if it was dynamic. We don't even have that. We have labeled groups. And we have the whites that used to be majority. Now we're becoming a minority, and we're still being attacked for being the oppressive group because we set in place a culture that was successful.
Yeah.
That's our sin.
Have either one of you heard anything about the committee doing anything to push new candidates?
Dan Moriarty.
I know. He's supposed to.
He spoke to
Has
me
he?
once, but there hasn't been any real follow-up on that.
No, there's
I mean,
five.
he didn't. He canceled today.
There's five
because
missing
he's-
spots.
Yeah.
4, 7, and 3 at large. We need at least
That's for the
alderman.
alderman. What about for DOE?
You mean the
Anybody?
board?
Yeah.
He hasn't helped me. I'm looking for that. And then there's the public works, 2 there. We're back to normal.
Okay,
I
I'm
hear
ready
he's
when
not
you
going.
are.
Just give us a few more minutes. I haven't heard anything from that at all. I got to go try to get a hold of Jack. We have a meeting next month that I was anticipating getting some kind of update on all the things that we were supposed to do. And from what I'm hearing, nobody's organizing that. I mean, you have the people that are supposed to be doing it.
I
but
get the
that's as far
feeling
as
that
it got.
they're like Sonata and Horn. They
Yeah,
didn't want this to
right.
come in, and they passed the baton to somebody that will keep that. They don't care about this. They don't want to fundraise for it. They don't want to contribute to it. They want it to go away, and they'll focus on the state issue. That's what I'm seeing. Because when
Well,
you
Jack-
have these fundraisers like that chocolate and wine, who is that money for? That's for the state. I mean, it's supposed to be 2 different bank accounts.
Yeah, yeah. But
They don't differentiate.
One of the things Jack said when he was very embarrassed that we didn't have somebody running against the mayor. All right, do something about it.
It was a little too late.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Do a write-in. Let Jack run.
Yeah, right.
Why not? Tell him to run.
All right, so I don't know, what do you want to turn in terms of the subject
Yeah.
matter? I'm not, do we have an hour's worth, or are we just
Yeah.
going to go? We're
Well-
going for an hour?
We do.
We can get an hour in here. If we don't, we'll just run it short. You know, if we start stuttering.
I guess
Okay.
then you can edit it down to the half hour, so,
Well, at least a half hour, and we'll go on as long as we can. If we have, I mean, if we get into it, I don't want to stop it. But if we're dragging, yeah, I don't want to
all right,
bore
well, you
people
can make that
either.
call, I guess.
Okay.
Do you have a secret signal to,
Okay, no, I'll just, we'll just bring it to a close, that's
Okay.
all.
He'll just say, thank you for coming, and we're done.
Okay,
do we have water?
Oh, we don't have our water, see? Doggone
Somebody
it.
is not doing their job
Oh, I gotta do it.
Jack,
I don't know about you, Tara.
here. I do like that.
Where's the waiter?
Just in case you start getting a frog in
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring a bottle of vodka next
If you
time.
don't have it, you know you'll need it. But if you do have it, you won't need it.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, we have in here restorative practices. That's restorative justice. We never voted on it. I'm finding all kinds of things in here. Cultural competency training? Whose culture? You're going to pick one and you're going to leave the others out. This is why they have to be able to opt out.
Or the culture that we're going to decide to create. And
The one that's
competency will be-
approved, yeah. Because there's bound to be. We used to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and we all agreed upon that. We don't even agree upon that anymore. But now we're going into the Netherlands, I mean, of how Susie and Johnny behaved.
Again, I'm starting to think the best idea might be to just give everybody their 10,000, say, you decide where you want to send your kid. And then,
It has to be done from the school level. It can't be done from the state or federal level, or they will regulate it. So what Croydon does, that's the way to do it. They take out of their budget and they'll say, this is the max we're giving. You tell us where you're going, we'll send the money. That's the model.
yeah,
This ESAs, they're coming from the Fed under Cruz that O'Brien's probably going to support $5 billion. Who knows if they'll pass. That's disaster. That will make us like Sweden. Public and private will use the same curriculum. will all be doing SEL.
No.
And even if the state does it, and the state does it, they give these nonprofit organizations 5% off the top. That's huge. The federal one is 10% off the top.
Has Ada Blue taken a position on social emotional learning? Or?
We want a technical advisory from him.
Ah, thank
What
you.
I want to know is, can parents still opt out? That's the law. And will they respect our rights by saying that we have to be fully informed and written consent?
Okay, I'll introduce myself. You introduce yourselves.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. In 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Hello, and welcome to People's View panel discussion, where we discuss
Now
things.
we're gonna start that again. Yeah. Okay.
Guess you can't follow those numbers.
No, anyways.
I think it's number 2
7,
on.
6,
He didn't coordinate.
5, 4, 3.
Hello, this is People's View panel discussion, where we talk about issues that are of interest to the state, the city, and the county. Today, we'll have Carl Seidel from Ward 1, 4-term Public Works member, and
Doris Hohensee, school board member, first term.
Kevin Scully, Ward 6, longtime resident, former state rep.
so we have to have a lot of discussion. I guess we could start out with some of the state problems. I think the governor has already lined up 40 vetoes, and there still could be 15 to 20 more. There's a lot of issues that just haven't been fed to him yet. The Democrats control the bills that they have to go before the governor.
Right. I think he's at about 38
Yeah,
so
38?
far.
Okay.
And that number is going to grow. It's funny, I saw a little graphic about that. And he is by
Yes.
far and away issued more vetoes than any governor, I think, before.
Ever.
But I must say, in his defense, that I don't think that anybody really realized when the folks put the Democrats into power just how radical the Democrat Party has become, even at the state level. And so there's a lot of bills in there, including, trying to push through the income tax that they were calling,
suddenly,
the
yeah,
Family and Medical
yeah.
Leave Act.
It was a
illegal licenses for illegal aliens.
Right.
I mean, those are just examples of some of the things that's been put on his desk. There's a lot of gun control measures. I think they're known as red flag laws, where the state can just basically go
Right.
in and confiscate things without really due process. He's been vetoing those as well. So I think he's been doing a pretty. Honestly, I would like to see him veto a couple more, but at
Well,
the
we're
end of
going
the
to
day,
see if at the end, I'm sure somebody's going to total them all up and look at them and you see where they stand. And the veto day, I understand, is the middle of September.
Right.
So that'll be an interesting time for all of us to find out what he actually vetoed and why.
Well, it's funny, like some of the bill, he did allow the driver's license bill that has the non-binary
Right, the X.
designation.
Yes.
Before you were either a man or a woman, and suddenly now you could become an X. And somebody raised a very interesting issue that those licenses, if somebody chooses to put an X on there, may not be able to be used to travel. The
yeah.
federal regulations do not recognize X. So they may have really shot themselves in the foot. I wonder sometimes if the governor just said, well, you wanted it, I'm going to give it to you.
That could be interesting just to see what happened. Huh?
Yeah,
That sounds interesting.
Unintended consequences, I think, of laws that people try to push through without
Well,
really thinking.
he said he would correct those problems if they surfaced. We're also worried about how that plays out.
Well, I think he knows he has to correct it, but I think, as you say, just see if somebody gets stung by it, and then we'll figure out what we have to do instead of trying to do it now. You presented it, you voted for it, live with any
He
damage.
vetoed a bill that for non-academic surveys and assessments that parents have to be informed and have written consent. The Democrats wanted to get rid of that bill. He had signed it into law, and he vetoed the reversal. So we still have that, and that's
that's
an
good.
important law.
Yeah,
Oh, that's huge for parental control. I mean,
yeah.
Well, they were giving kids surveys, and parents weren't realizing what they were being asked. I mean, they're asking all kinds of invasive private questions of the family, of the household. Now, if there's some kind of incident going on in the family, you think your child shouldn't be answering those, or you want to know and talk to him and debrief him when he's done because something's going on in the household, you should know what's going on. So they inform you, they give you a copy of this survey so you know if it's appropriate for your child, and then you can give consent or not.
Right, right. And I think they're trying to blame some of the problems on the family or something like that because, oh, this family has this problem, this family owns guns, and all the things like that go along with that. It's scary what can be done with some of that information because it's not valid, really.
well, we're not at this point here, and I'm not suggesting that, but I have been reading news articles where the Chinese government is encouraging the children to basically rat out their parents
Yeah.
and
Right,
drop a
right.
dime on them and tell them if they're secret Christians or anything else. So this idea of having the state step in and start polling the children as to what's going on inside their homes, the
Right.
privacy of their homes, is very, very
Well,
disquieting.
that's what the Germans did. If you remember with the brown scouts or whatever they called them, they had the children,
The Nazi youth.
Nazi youth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, and there's a statue in the Soviet Union of a young boy who turned in his parents.
Right.
Parents were killed. The rest of the extended family, again, I'm not advocating any kind of violence, but the rest of the extended family ended up killing the 12-year-old that sentenced his own parents to death.
Wow.
And the Soviets put a statue up to the kid because he was a hero of the state for turning in and having his parents killed. It's, again, I'm not suggesting that is going to happen here, but you got to really be very, very careful when you start allowing
Yeah,
the state
that's
to do
right.
those kind of things.
Well, with this social emotional learning, this is behavior modification that they're getting involved in. It borders on mental health. It's triggering whether the behavior indicates that there's a mental health problem, and then they'll outsource you. But for them to even begin to assess the behavior and
Right.
the child without written consent from the parent, if they did that outside a school building, that professional would lose their license because
Wow.
these are minors. But you put it in a school building, and all those protections go away.
Well, isn't that, wouldn't it be more appropriate if they suspected something or they had some problems like that, get the family together with the people at the school and say, look, this is how we see it in school. Shouldn't we work with you to help the child? Not do it themselves,
Right.
because they think they know better because they have a degree or something.
That's common sense. I tried a couple of years ago to put in procedures or policies for the district so we know what they're doing because there was a child that was pulled out of class and the parent was never notified. The child fortunately discussed it with the mother and there was some communication, but that should not have happened.
Right.
So I tried to correct the problem and try to put in place some type of insurance that the parents would be notified, even if it was after. If it was an
Right.
emergency, afterwards. Couldn't get them to cooperate at all.
What was
It's-
their reason?
Well, tell us the name of the parent and the student so we can correct the problem. I'm like,
You know
no,
how.
they don't want any retribution. They just want it solved, and they don't want to be in the limelight.
Right.
They don't want to be the poster child for this whole new policy. But the school psychologists were very offended that I
Good.
would even ask.
Huh.
And this goes on in all districts in the state. There are no policies. They have certain type of professional ethics that they have, but it doesn't suit me. If my child was pulled out of class for an issue and I was never notified, that's unacceptable.
Does the state have anything to do with this? I mean, do they?
Psychologists in the schools are optional,
Yeah.
and they suggest that they follow these professional ethics. If we as a district wanted to make rules, common courtesy rules and, just straightening
Right.
it out. I mean, if it's something that goes to DCYF, of course that's an emergency and you follow certain protocols. But if it's an in-house problem, at some point you tell the parent, you get them
Right.
involved. How is the family going to help improve this situation if they're not even informed?
So that's not something you could put into the policies, what you're saying.
You could.
I mean, no, they wouldn't agree to
They
it.
would not even have the conversation. I wrote up a draft policy and said, I want feedback. This is this is what I'm looking
Yeah.
for. Would not even look at it. I
Really?
was bad for even suggesting that I protect parents and their interest in their
Now,
students.
as a school board member, were you able to go directly to the superintendent with that? I mean, does it have to go through the
We s-
board to
We
receive?
sent it to the policy committee where we had a discussion, and it was very divisive
So at the board level
at the committee level.
of the board?
Subcommittee.
Yes, and then we go to the full board and we vote, and it got voted down.
Wow.
Because, if I remember when I had my kids, they welcomed us anytime we wanted to get involved.
Well, you think you'd really want transparency, and
Yeah.
you want that kind of parent involvement, especially if there's a problem with the child.
Well, they
Why
assume
they
that
would
the
fight you on
parent
that.
is part of the problem if they're not telling them what's going on. That they need to operate outside the parent's sphere, outside the family. That's saying that family's dysfunctional. We can do it better. That's
No, I can't do
that's
that.
my attitude. It's not the right approach to take.
No.
And if they are so dysfunctional that you can't inform the parent, then report them to DCYF.
Right.
There's got to be an either or. You either
Mm-hmm.
have the transparency with the family or you have a critical situation.
I think you have to err on the side of involving the family until it becomes quite apparent that there is some problem in the family. Why wouldn't you not assume that the family's
Right.
functional and you'd want to involve the parents
I
as?
don't think they assume that. I think they give themselves 2 or 3 sessions, a certain number of visits with the child before they can discern that. But my point is, after they discern whatever they're discerning, if they still haven't informed the parent, there's a problem. At that point, they've got to inform the family or inform the state agency. They can't be raising this child in a vacuum.
Oh, heck, I think if they're seeing the child more than once about any issue,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
parent should
yeah.
be involved
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Because if it was serious enough to put them in
Right.
twice, then the parents ought to know what's going
By the
on.
way,
Even if it was once, just so that child doesn't get confused. Why is this happening to me? So you tell the parent so the parent can work with the child and make them feel comfortable that they were pulled out of the class. Did they do something wrong? So it's, the psychologist doesn't always see the full picture. I mean, parents see the child from a different perspective. They can add something to help the child.
well, you people in the audience, if any of you want to work on it, the Board of Education has,
5
what is it,
openings.
9 openings?
5.
5 openings.
5 out of 9.
5 openings. And we'd like to have some people who are interested in wanting, solving some of these problems to apply for those jobs. Get out there
Yeah.
and talk about why you want to improve the Board of Education's function.
That'd be great.
Thank you. What do we can do with some of the ones that are coming up in Concord? Do you have anything that you've found up there that is of interest?
Are we talking about other bills now
Yeah.
that are heading towards the governor's desks?
Yeah.
Our desk. No, at this point, I think the ones that I was really interested in have pretty much hit there. I will do a little more research for the next time I come back, and
Okay.
then we could talk about that then. It was interesting, there was one bill that I was concerned about, and it had to do with protecting elderly parents. And who could be against wanting to make sure that there was no kind of elder abuse? I would say everybody wants to make sure that doesn't happen, but so often the devil is in the details. And the bill that was put on the governor's desk, and I think it was HB 696, had, for me, some very, very problematic aspects to it. One was the fact that if somebody, and they didn't really define who, considered there to be an emergency situation, they could hold a hearing regarding what they consider to be some form of elder abuse without actually notifying the person who was being accused of the abuse. So they could hold the trial in absentia, basically, and come up with a finding, which to me, that is not due process. You're supposed to be allowed to face your accuser in court, present your own defense. They had rules of evidence, which basically said that they could be relaxed and the court could decide to allow whatever they thought was appropriate in as evidence in the trial. And I'm thinking, wow, that is such an open door.
Yeah.
You could, hearsay, double hearsay, a friend of a friend, found a slip of paper on the ground. It could really take you into bad places. And the last aspect of the bill that I found very problematic was the fact that they were going to allow, and it wasn't, there's a very important distinction between the word may and the word shall.
Yeah.
And in law, if you say may, you're giving some kind of
Right.
discretion to the person there to
You
decide
don't
what's
have
appropriate.
to do it, but
Right. This bill said shall, and it had to do with the confiscation of guns. And so if a peacekeeper came into a situation where they thought, now it's interesting, they gave 3 different conditions for which they could basically confiscate weapons. One was abuse. Now that one is, a much more straightforward to me. God forbid you went into a situation, you saw an older person with bruises on their faces, you're going, oh boy, this guy is a person, is violent, this is a bad situation. Maybe then I could see that. But they also had the aspects of exploitation, which is really much
yeah.
more of like a financial thing. Like, okay, somebody is draining the bank account. How's the peace officer in a
Right.
that kind of a day-to-day meeting situation going to know that there's exploitation? And the third one was neglect. And that came down to something so broad as even emotional abandonment.
Right.
Okay, so you think that somebody has not been spoken to nicely often enough, and now I shall confiscate all your weapons. So, and there was no provision for the return of them, so it was just somebody walks in, they think something's wrong here, they shall, and just take them all away. So this is like a red flag
Yeah,
law
definitely.
that just, to me, was so broad, and the fact that they used shall meant that
You
the
had
peace
to do
officer
it, yeah.
basically had to do
You had
something.
no leeway.
It was dangerous.
Yeah.
So the governor vetoed that, and I think, and I rightly so,
Right.
So maybe they'll take a step back again and they can address these more problematic issues so that we can do something that will serve to protect our elderly without trampling on the rights of others and throwing the, Fourth Amendment and due process
Well,
out the
it
window.
just shows a trend that some people think that the government knows better than anybody else, and they because they have all these experts up there. Hell, you got the it's more of a swamp than anything else.
I think there's a lot of self-appointed experts,
Right, you're
people
right
who
on
think
that.
they're the smartest person in the room. And it was interesting. I mean, I only served 1 term up there, but what I found very interesting was the fact how many laws were being proposed to fix laws.
That's right.
Because they put them out there, and all of a sudden they ran into problems they never anticipated.
You probably found some of the laws that have been changed back and forth depending on who's the majority,
Yeah.
because they change it each time. Some of those going on for the essentially 10-year span that I was up there. But the other thing is that people were complaining about the budget being canceled, and therefore some of the money funds were going. But what they haven't heard about, and I blame the newspapers a lot for this, and the newscasts, you don't hear about some of the things behind the scene where the governor's trying to fix it.
Right.
And either by going through Jelcar, which means he can change rules of certain committees and move money around, and the Finance Committee, which controls that, both of which are ruled by the majority. And things are hurting when you have things that the governor wants to do, but the way they wanted to accomplish it wasn't a very good way, like you said in your last example. The Finance Committee wouldn't allow him to move the money around to take care of the people who were in dire need.
So this was the Democrat-controlled Jalkar committee. that
Well,
was
or the
actually-
Finance Committee, either one
Or-
of them.
which are
Depends on
obstructing-
whichever was the problem with either the rules or the movement of funds from one account to another.
Well, there's been some shenanigans going on up there with some of the Jalkar meetings. I know one thing I was following in the papers, and that had to do with the fact, and you'll forgive me, I've forgotten the very long name of the chemical contaminant that
Oh,
was
yeah,
problematic up in Merrimack.
The
And it was,
fluoride compounds.
yes, in this, associated with the Saint Gobain manufacturing up there. And so there was a great hue and cry, and I certainly don't want to poo-poo the idea of people getting clean water. I am all for that. But as so many times, what happens is once emotion and fear take hold, then people start doing things, and very often there's an overcompensation. So it's my understanding that in New Hampshire, they were proposing to have a safety standard for concentrations of that compound in the water, which was 85% less than what the feds say is okay and safe. Maybe more of that. It's like, I think the feds wanted 70, and our DES came in and said we want it at 11. I mean, much, much lower. And I've actually worked in the environmental field, and what you find out is like getting that last 20% will cost every bit as much as knocking out the first 80%. So it's very, very difficult. And so they had a JALCAR meeting about this as to whether they should adopt this regulation. And it's my understanding that the Democrats shut it down.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of people up there to give information to make sure we were handling this the right way. They did not want to hear it. They just shut it down and went right to a vote. Nobody, I'm not sure they took any.
Didn't think they could shut anything down because they were doing that with the Learn Everywhere that the Department of Education put through, and they didn't like it. But I thought they can only file objections, and either the agency corrects them and comes back to fix them, or if it goes to court, then the agency has to prove.
But
it's the
what they
burden
were
of
doing
proof.
is they were allowing this thing to go through. So
The agency's
they wouldn't
proposal
listen
was
to these.
really, really low
Yeah.
in terms of what they wanted to
Right,
set
so
that
they just
standard.
blocked it and it didn't go through at all?
No, it went through.
They
Oh, it
allowed it
went
to go
through.
through without any discussion.
Oh.
And so the thing of it is,
So they rubber
that
stamped it.
creates, yes, they rubber stamped it. So that creates an incredible cost burden for all
Oh,
of
yeah.
the communities who are now going to have to try to meet that incredibly low standard that I'm really not sure is necessary to protect human health. So this is where we're getting, the number I heard was literally across the state of New Hampshire, it was going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking about a lot of money here.
Well,
And it got
yeah.
shut down, and they just didn't discuss it. Just do it. Oh, you know what I love, if I may
Yeah,
just
go
say
ahead.
one other thing. So somebody came back and said, hey, wait a second, you can't do that. That's an unfunded mandate.
Right.
And the response was, well, we've already mandated them to take care of water quality, so we can basically do anything we want as long as we can say it has something to do with water quality. And that's what's happening now. So, and I think it's going to hit Nashua too. We're going to have to, certainly have to test for it, and God forbid we find any of it at these, anywhere near these very, very low levels. Then we'd have to put in some probably very expensive treatment system. And suddenly it's going to be another expense that's
Yeah,
going to
that
hit
was
our.
a following article, and I forget how many days after that discussion, that showed that there was a plant that was being designed, a multi-million-dollar plant, to do the filtering, to get it out, to absorb the compound before it gets into the water.
And where? Here? Or?
Well, I don't remember where I think the plant was, because this is happening in a number of places in this country. It might have been someplace else, because I don't remember the location. I don't think it pointed out any place here in New Hampshire, but I think it was just included because somebody came out with the fact that we have a plant that can do that now.
Yeah, but the question is how much does it cost?
That's
And is it
right.
really necessary?
Right.
So, I mean, from my perspective, we've got a limited, finite resource, which is the dollars that come in, the tax revenue. Where do you want to spend it? And if you spend $5 here unnecessarily, that's money you can't spare
But
somewhere
again,
else where you really
that's
could
not
use
the
it.
way they work at. They work at what do we want to do, and then how do we pay for it?
We'll worry about that
Yeah,
later to
right.
pay for it. Well, they know how we're going to pay for it, right? It's going to be us.
Yeah.
But it's there's like the camel and the straws in the back. And so I think something similar happened to that, didn't they, up there with the educational hearings? Do you know about
The
that?
Learn Everywhere, I think that they wanted to object to a lot of things. They wanted to shut it down. I don't think, they weren't in the mood to rubber stamp that. Because I went to the hearing at the department, and the Democrats they were pretty much opposed to it across the board. I was opposed to it too, because I think it's a local control issue. So I was following it to see where it would shake out.
Now, wasn't that something
And
that was
it's not
passed in the
finalized.
House and the Senate on a voice vote? Is this the bill that I'm thinking
No,
about?
the bill to allow it failed in the legislature.
Okay.
So they're doing it in rules. Now, I've seen this before. I mean,
So they're circumventing the legislative
They'll
process.
change the rules
Yeah.
to accomplish the same thing.
competency-based education is another one. It's not in statute. It's in rules. The rules could be straightened out and we wouldn't have competency-based education. But they overstep in rules sometimes. But as far as I understood, it didn't get adopted. There was objections by JELCAR because the Democrats control that committee,
Yes, they do.
sending it back to the department to rework some issues. But I wasn't at the hearing.
Well, if they rework it the right way, but you don't necessarily follow, you don't get enough information from the JOCAR meetings. I went through them a couple of times and that was it. It was just didn't make sense to me the way they zip through those things.
You have to know an issue before, or you're told how to vote.
Well, yeah, parliamentary procedure can be abused, depending if you have an agenda and you want to, either make something happen or not. And I think, I don't know, the devil's in the details, but we're seeing that a little too often now. What we're seeing a lot of in Concord right now, unfortunately, is my way or the highway. And I don't think there's a heck of a lot of bipartisanship now. It's funny, like for instance, the budget that ultimately was put on the governor's desk, that was, usually you pick members of the House and members of the Senate to work together in a conference, committee of conference. And you do try to pick members from both parties to,
That can bring the factions together.
but they didn't do that. So they had no Republicans on there at all. And I think people really raised a stink about this and they said, okay, we'll put on one Republican who's a non-voting member. So you could sit in the room, you have no say in this at all. We're going to decide what to do. And so the Democrat House and the Democrat Senate basically just sent through what they wanted to send and put on the governor's desk. And it's funny because I was reading one newspaper article where they were calling it a compromise budget. I'm thinking, compromise with who?
From what they initially wanted.
Well, they did throw out a few things, but nowhere near. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 40 vetoes. I mean, there's enough. The governor's not playing games there. He thinks very seriously about some of that legislation.
And I have to tell you, I mean, he's probably a better man than I am. But after what they did to his Supreme Court pick, and which is purely just politics and to knock a good person down, I'd be a little less, how would we say it, for giving in terms of my willingness to. Yeah, I'd have to say, okay, let's talk, because I'm not in the mood to
Well,
be
it's going
nice
to be
today.
interesting. They have 8 weeks before they have a meeting where they're going to have to vote on a new budget and vote on overthrowing the vetoes.
Yeah. So how long's the continuing resolution for? I mean, it's like a 3-month one, right?
Yeah, 3-month one.
So we're talking about.
July, August, September.
Right, so
October 1st is they either have to extend it or vote for something.
Well, it sounds like the Democrats do not want to give on raising business taxes.
From what I heard, they're taking odds on whether it's going to be till the end of the year on a continuing budget.
I think it might be.
But as Sununu says, I'm saving money.
Yes.
Now, the only problem is if they don't let them start service some of those needs,
Right.
but that's the way they hold it up. You got to do it without trying to cover the things that other bills are trying to cover but won't because we don't have a budget.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that I read in the paper was the Parks Department.
No?
And what I think they said was because it's the summertime, and that's when people use the parks the
right,
most.
right.
So I believe, if I read this correctly, I think like over 50% of the budget is spent in just this 3-month period now in the summertime. And so with the way the continuing resolution budget goes, I think it's being equal funded. There is no weighting to the fact that they really need more money now. And they're making noises about, starting to shut down some of our state parks.
Oh, yeah.
So this is like what they did, with the shut down the government way back when, at the federal level. So I'm hoping, I would think everybody, Democrat and Republican, would all say, let's keep the parks open for our families and our kids. It'll be interesting to see if they can agree on that. Or
We
if it-
should be able to take some of the money we have for shoveling the snow in the winter and let the parks use it in the summer when it's needed. But that's what I was saying about the moving the money around. They wanted to reduce the waiting list on the mental health things, and they wanted to build the hospital beds and stuff. And they couldn't move money to do that. And there's money available. That's
oh, that's the maddening thing, right? It's there. And
yeah. It's available. You have to move it from someplace to but they won't allow that.
When you say what, the Democrats won't?
Yeah, it's the fiscal committee that approves of certain types of movement. You can do some within certain limits by just the department itself, but if you do it out of, I don't forget what the regulations say, but if you have to move either larger sums or from certain types of budget levels
Like,
to
yeah.
another level, it needs a fiscal committee.
So we got somebody, they're playing playing hardball here.
But nobody talks about it.
Can the legislature in September make a resolution or something to move some of the money and forget about the committee?
Well, that's one thing they can do. They can put, yeah, they're going to have the legislature and they're going to move some other, they can make other laws too.
Because then it's public, the vote. They'd
Yeah.
have to vote against one initiative at a
That
time.
might be one way
And that
of
might
doing
be a
it,
way of getting it passed.
We'll see how people, if people
We'll
actually
have to
truly
ask
want
that
to
question,
compromise.
yeah, see if that's another way of playing the game.
Because if there's roll calls and you shine some light
Right,
on
yeah.
who wants to help the mentally ill
Right.
and who doesn't,
You might have to suspend parliamentary procedure, wouldn't you, if you're going to try to, I mean, to pull out specific items and,
Not if you announce that this is going to be a session again.
oh, so they'd have to call everybody back into session. and
Well,
put
they're going
that-
to do that anyway, to vote on the
for the
budget.
overrides. And
And to override the vetoes, so they'll have something there. I don't know if they have to make a statement so many weeks ahead of time that we'll take new legislation.
Well, yeah, normally, obviously, you like to have it go through the whole process
Right.
of the public hearings and everything else, but if it's, again, some specific funding for issues that are already in the budget and everybody understands what it's for, yeah, I'd feel comfortable with foregoing that and just going right to,
you would think
know,
it'd be
putting
like emergency budgeting.
like a little carve-out bill, and, yeah, well, let's,
We'll see.
Hey,
We'll see.
we'll go up there and knock on some doors and tell them, hey, do it this way. Wake up and do it right. So, it's going to be interesting just day by day, because they're just dribbling in, until they finally get them all done. I would assume that by the end of August they'll have all the bills on the governor's desk. But that's,
well, it is funny, the way the session went up there, at least from talking to my friends that are still up in Concord, again, there was so little give and take. I said, I was saying half in jest. I said, well, why don't you just, take the session off and show up on veto day, because
Yeah.
everything's getting rammed through and
Yeah.
you have no say in what's happening. And so save yourself some time and effort, and just, so I guess we're two there now where they're going to,
well, maybe they're working on the Jelcar and the fiscal committee, which are still functioning, I guess. It's kind of interesting to see what goes. And again, I think our audience should be aware of what's happening, listening to the newscast and try to keep abreast of that, and to write your legislator and to write to the governor of how you feel, because that's the only way we're going to get something through. Get them to work on the problems that I don't know if the county has any problems. I haven't heard of anything there, but that's sort of being run pretty smoothly, I
yeah,
guess.
and they had a pretty good surplus too, as I remember, right? So
Yeah, but the one problem they did have is the county attorney, and he was having so many problems with the opiate problems. I don't know whether they were overworked, and he wanted to add several people. That's the only thing I've heard of there. I think they've hired some, but I don't know whether he got what he needed. Again, but it's pretty run pretty fairly. But again, let me encourage some of our audience to go out and, the county offices will be voted on next year, so think about that. It's all these things that we need to do. Get active in your local Republican or Democrat club and get it to run a little bit more smoothly. If you want to come to the Republican club on the second Thursday of every month, we're at the Marriott Residence Inn, and you're welcome there. Or is that, there's one that's going to be at the Nashua Country Club. Check the Nashua website, nashuagop.org, and you're welcome to come and talk and get active in either the city or the county or the state elections that are coming up in the next year and a half. So if there's listening to our show, we'll have more every week. We have one panel, at least one panel discussion, and we have particular interviews of people who are going to be running for office. We have people that are going to be running for the federal legislature, Congress, and the Senate, and they'll be interviewed on this show also. So thank you for listening in, and we'll see you next time.